because it's too much. There is so much going on. There are so many things competing for your time and attention that if you believe that you have to reinvent yourself, you'll put it off. Any master procrastinators out there, you'll put it off and you'll put it off and put it off until you absolutely must do something. I've had many friends in 911 who put off their self-care or put off dealing with real problems until they absolutely had to. And in several cases, it's when they were in a hospital bed, or they were on long-term disability, or when they got a divorce, or when they got in like me, an accident. When I was deep in my stuff, in my stress and the attitude associated with it, I was getting in minor fender benders all the time. I live in Los Angeles. Any of you who have been to Los Angeles, you know traffic sucks. And being a hardcore road rager, I would tailgate people, and I was so focused on where I was going, I wasn't paying attention to where I was. And so someone would brake quickly, and I saw that they had several car lengths in front of them. Why are they not speeding up? And they would brake quickly, and I would hit them, and then we would pull over, exchange of info, and I would get out of the car, and I would say, why are you... I might have had something to do with that. Nah. And that's stress outside of the job. But what about inside the job? So we're going to talk today about stress awareness, and what to do about it. I have had folks leave this very breakout session with a renewed sense of purpose, with a renewed sense of, you know what, this is not, it's not rocket science. It's likely not anything that you haven't heard before today, but occasionally we need a reminder. We need a reminder that we got to take better care of ourselves. We need a reminder that just white knuckling it till tomorrow, which is for many of us retirement, white knuckling it to retirement is possibly not the best option.
Press Alt plus capital A.
No, if I unmute, that means they can hear everything we say in here. We got to
Brenda,
get
we can definitely hear you. Tim, if you can, as the host, hit the mute all function. There you go. So I would like you to consider what you define as stressful. How do you define stress? You might define stress by the circumstances that create stress for you. You might define stress by the way it feels in the body. I'd like you to consider, what is your personal definition of stress? You might have a clinical definition of stress that you learned in a stress class. You might have read a book once. Please bring to mind, and if you're taking notes because you want a gold star for your presence here, write down your personal definition of stress. How do you define stress? Certainly you would agree that we cannot talk about our own personal stress situation if we do not first define it. Maybe you've heard that stress is subjective. What creates stress for you may not create stress for me, and vice versa. And so if you don't have your definition handy, how can you begin to see what's really, really going on? You have your definition of stress? Now, oh, thank you, Demetrius. Yeah, I would love to get a couple of them in the comment there. The sense of feeling uncomfortable. Other common definitions I've heard, stress feels like when I have too much going on and not enough time. Stress feels like just that nagging sensation that I can't get the things done that I really want to. Stress feels like when there's just meh. When we haven't prioritized things that lift us up, we may cross over that threshold of burnout. And it's then when we start to see kind of shades of gray. Can't focus or think straight. Thanks, Tim. Feeling overwhelmed. Thanks, Lori. Jackie, my response to the situation that causes me to feel overloaded. Thank you so much. Scott, a feeling of lack of control. These are all great. Now, whatever you have written down there, or whatever you are coming up with as your definition of stress. A good way of understanding how much stress a given circumstance or situation in your life creates for you is right here. On the left, we have expectation. On the right, we have reality. In the distance between these 2 points determines how much stress a given circumstance or situation in your life creates for you. I know a lot of type A overachieving perfectionists who work in this profession, whose expectations are not even grounded in reality whatsoever. And there's an opportunity there when you find that your expectations are very infrequently lived up to by reality. When I started at 911 with the LAPD, when I was 24 years old, I had an expectation that people would only call 911 for real 911 emergencies. I'm from small town Minnesota. To this day, I have yet to call 911 for any particular reason. I was very surprised to find that there are folks who call 911 every single day for any particular reason. I also had an expectation when I came into the profession that our 60 supervisors would lead us boldly into the future with kindness, caring, and clear leadership vision. We're a union shop, by the way. I also had an expectation that I could easily keep the rigors of the job from taking over the rest of my daily life. How far were my expectations from reality? Miles, which primed me for burnout very early on in my career. In fact, it was about the 2-year mark. If you've looked over any of the research in our profession that talks about the impact of duty-related trauma, vicarious trauma, cumulative stress, you've likely seen that most who work in our profession grapple with the first wave of burnout around the 3-year mark. For me, I showed these signs and symptoms at about the 2-year mark, which should have been a warning sign, should have sent off like sirens and stuff. I even got a warning, a verbal warning. And I'm not talking about my discipline record. That's for another time. A friend of mine advised me. She said at the 2-year mark, Adam, you have been in this job for far too little time to be as burnt out and crusty as you already are. Be careful when you're on the phones. Apparently that was lost on me. So what we're talking about today is what happens when we cross over the peak. I love this graphic here. And you'll see on the x-axis, we have pressure. On the y-axis, we have performance. You'll see to a point, as the pressure increases, so does your performance level. And there's even a such thing as underload, where boredom resides. If you've ever worked graveyard shift at 4 or 5 in the morning. Many of us crossed over the peak a long time ago, and we didn't even know. Now, you'll also see that there's an optimum band of stress. And the stress psychologists call it eustress. I just call it good stress, where focus and motivation and creativity resides. If you are like me and you hanker for your morning cup of joe, that is good stress. Did you know that high dose of caffeine activates the stress response? And it's the adrenaline boost that we're looking forward to. If you like thrill rides, amusement parks, if you like driving fast, for example, this is all eustress, demonstration of eustress, excitement, excited anticipation, and your ability to dwell in the optimum band of stress when it comes to work has to do with a few different things: genetics, psychological predispositions. But one of the most important, and one of the things that we can absolutely control on a daily basis, is your level of resilience. So I want to give you a down and dirty definition of resilience. If you're not really clear about what we're talking about here. Resilience is the ability to bounce back, as it says here. That's the art of bouncing back. Resilience is the ability to bring your best to your work and to your life on a consistent basis. I'd like you to consider, why would it be important for you personally to have high levels of resilience to draw from. So you experience less stress both on and off the job. And if we could say that we define stress by the things that are in the chat window here, that resilience might give you more of a semblance of control. Resilience might make you feel less overwhelmed when the pressure is on, when it's hitting the fan. Resilience might be able to enhance your ability to focus or think straight. I'd like you to go one level deeper. Why would that matter? So I'd love to get a share here. If someone could throw something in the chat window there. Why does resilience matter to you? I would like you to personalize this response. Why does it matter for you personally to have higher levels of resilience to draw from so you experience less stress both on and off the job? Why does that matter? A dispatcher in one of my classes raised her hand and said, you know, there's a lot of people depending on me. And resilience matters to me because I need to show up for my job. I want to provide experiences for my kids that I didn't have when I was growing up. Also, I don't really want my kids to fear me. My worst nightmare is having my kids be scared of when mom comes home. And I love the detail in that explanation because it's easy to see that person values family and that person values being a great parent, and that person values also a strong work ethic and how they show up on the job. And so your response to this question is going to illustrate to you your deeper values system, some of your core beliefs about the work that you do. Tim, I love this. It helps us come back tomorrow and rest for a new day. Jackie, thank you so much. So I can show up. Sandra, so I can stay sane. Thank you. Yes. So I have something left over to care for my mom. Oh, thank you so much. So that I'm not mean to those who I love, because I actually like my job and I don't want to get fired. That too. Thank you, Tia. And here's what's great about being able to boost your resilience. There's been a ton of research, both on resilience in 911, but also in the world at large. And the research shows that resilient people see stressful events as challenges, as opportunities to rise up. They commit to goals. They focus on what they can control. So they have what they call an internal locus of control, as opposed to stressing about all the things outside of their control. They don't blame themselves when clearly they are not to blame. They are more empathetic than the rest of the population, and they generally think more positively. And you look at some of these signs of resilient people and the effects of resilience, and who comes to mind? And you might have smatterings of resilience. You might have times when you're feeling fresh, you got your cup of coffee, you slept okay, and you're resilient on those days. Who at your center demonstrates resilience on a daily basis? Every single day, you can see that they choose to show up in a very intentional way. The person who always comes to my mind when I think of that is one of my former coworkers. Tony is her name. She retired last year after 37 years in the profession, and 37 years as a frontline telecommunicator. She did not promote. She felt like, my skills and my efforts are best used here on the dispatch floor. And that in itself is amazing, because the temptation at a large agency. So if you're not familiar with the Los Angeles Police Department Communications Division, I was one of 700 line level dispatchers, and with a cadre of 60 supervisors. The supervisors didn't have to work the floor. In fact, most didn't. So once you graduated to the supervisory ranks, you're like, phew, I don't have to learn the new CAD anymore. I don't have to talk to those callers anymore. And the temptation was strong for people who could cut the mustard and get promoted to opt out. Tony, she didn't want that. So that's one thing that was amazing about Tony. Second thing, probably even more impactful for the rest of us all around her, was that every single day Tony came in with a smile on her face, and she interacted with everybody, her coworkers and callers alike, with this sing-songy disposition in her voice. And I would be stationed at a non-emergency console within earshot of Tony, and I was slogging through. For the first 7 years of my career, I was not having a good day for 7 years. And I was internalizing my angst about the callers and about the job. And I suffered from all of the attendant effects of daily chronic stress, tension headaches, and migraines. I had an ulcer. I had anger and frustration, which is why my coworkers called me Angry Adam behind my back. And so I was going through all these calls going, what do you want the police to do about it? Not a good question to ask callers, I found, especially when they are reporting something that definitely meets your agency's dispatch criteria. And what was even more frustrating for me personally was that I would hear Tony at an adjacent console talking to the exact same non-emergency callers like this. Los Angeles Police, what are you reporting? Okay. Looks like we have the call already. And you could hear her pausing and waiting for a disgruntled caller to finish. And she would say, oh, sweetie, we had the call. And thank you so much for giving us a call back. We will get the police out there just as soon as we can. I understand. You just have to have patience. We are working just as quickly as we can. I will let the officers know that you are still waiting. Thanks so much for the call. Bye-bye. Next call, Los Angeles Police, what are you reporting? And I wanted to go over to her and say, Tony, don't talk to them like that. They'll call back, and they'll become accustomed to this high level of customer service. Whereas I was certainly making things more difficult for myself, and potentially tarnishing or further tarnishing the agency's reputation in the eyes of the citizenry. Interesting how our effects can be felt in that way. So I'd like you to consider, so why resilience is important to you, and what the vision is for your life if you can show up in a way that matters, in the way that you want, on a consistent basis. And what I'm really asking you to do is tap into a vision for a life of less stress. What is that vision? And if you can get really, really clear about what that looks like and how it feels, you are much more likely to do something today to take the first step in that direction. One of my early mentors said what's on the top of this slide here. He said, pain pushes until vision pulls. And we've all experienced pain pushing when you're locked in a few days and a few weeks of stress and overtime and working with that coworker, you know the one, and you're wearing shoulder earrings and a curmudgeonly look on your face, and every little thing just gets under your skin and it's pushing you around. You've felt that, right? If you have a compelling vision for the future, that vision can keep you focused on where you are going. An example of this is knowing that every single day you have an opportunity to make a difference in someone's life. And if my vision is to make that difference each day consistently through positivity or whatever matters to you, then I can persevere through the more challenging times because I'm more in tune with that vision of tomorrow. If your vision is something like, oh my gosh, I just got to get through this shift until retirement, and I ask you, so how? That's awesome. It's good. We have a working to retirement culture in public safety. How much further do you have? Oh, let me check my countdown timer. 14 years, 6 months, and 3 days, and 1 more hour. If you are struggling for the next 14 years, it's a long slog. I encourage you to expand your vision in a bigger way than just getting to retirement. In fact, if that's the extent of your vision, you will likely get there. However, if you spent the last 20, 30 years of your 911 career not taking very good care of yourself, you might not have your health and wellness to rely on to enjoy that next chapter of your life. It happens so often. So I'd like you to think about your experience of good stress versus your experience of bad stress. Good stress is the pressure that tunes championship teams. Good stress is the type of stress that causes you to put a little bit of extra time into something that matters to you, working on a presentation or an interview opportunity or anything else. When have you experienced good stress? Most who work in this profession are adrenaline junkies. Maybe you have experienced good stress while working the console and there's an officer help call and you are working it and you get all the transmissions, you're talking, writing, broadcasting, coordinating responding units, and that's when you feel like you really thrive. That's a great example of good stress. I do find that adrenaline junkies who work in 911 sometimes clock out of their job, go home, and because we're so used to being keyed up and the adrenaline rushing, or at least waiting for an incident to happen so that we can feel that adrenaline rush while sitting at the console, we can't sit still when we go home. And so we busy ourselves, we're cleaning the house for the 5th time in the day, or we draw in people into our life who need fixing. If you're a fixer type of person, you might have difficulty saying no. As long as you're busy, as long as your plate is full, you feel like your efforts are making a difference. I think that has a lot to do with being always on. And especially when we have a positive relationship with stress, we might not see the value of unplugging from the stress response, turning it off, dialing it back a little bit, and then we cross over into bad stress or chronic stress. And there have been several studies in our profession that have quantified the toll of vicarious trauma, cumulative stress, critical incident stress, and it's not good. I mean, the research is finally showing us what we've always known about working in this profession. It takes a toll. And in some ways, it changes us irreversibly. And if we're not aware of how these changes are winding their way through our daily life, just becoming more aware can help. So without resilience, we burn out. This is a picture of me at about the 7-year mark, suffering from all the attendant effects of daily chronic stress. And it wasn't until I hit a breaking point at the 7-year mark, after my 3rd complaint, that I finally did something different. I took a stress reduction class, And that 6-week class changed my life. Thanks, Tim. The 6-week stress reduction class that I took at the 7-year mark of my career changed my life because I finally saw that I was the common denominator in all of my negative exchanges with callers, coworkers, supervisors. And then outside of the comm center, I was in a crappy relationship at home. I had drawn in someone who needed fixing. And so I was giving up a piece of myself for the piece of the situation. And in that 6-week class, I realized that I needed to let some things go. I needed to let go of the old things that were no longer serving me. And I did. Got out of that failing relationship at home. I got out of a failing side business that I was devoting my free time to. I stopped working so hard. And within 6 months, I was completely different. And my coworkers began to notice. And I thought, this could help others. So I wrote a proposal to start a stress reduction class at the dispatch center, submitted to my lieutenant, who was a watch commander at the time. And he said, hey, I'll support this. Go ask for the captain's approval. So I went to the captain, said, Captain Justice, no joke. That was the captain's name at this time. Captain Joel Justice. Captain Justice, I want to do this thing. He said, hey, whatever will make life easier around here, I will support. Go get behavioral science services support. That was staff psychologist. So I got Dr. Famili's buy-off, and it was going. This stress reduction program was a weekly 15-minute guided relaxation session that I did while on duty. It ran for a year and a half. Over 100 of my coworkers came through that early program, experiencing very similar results. And for 3.5 years longer, after that turning point at the 7-year mark, I worked at the LAPD, a very different dispatcher, a very different coworker, a very different person, both in and outside of the job. And there was some time in that last 3.5 years that one of my coworkers came up to me and said, hey, Adam, I don't know what you did, but you are so much easier to be around. Back then, we were calling you Angry Adam behind your back. And I was appalled. I'm from small town Minnesota, and I find that most Midwesterners have a decent reputation of being nice, congenial people. And I thought myself to be that way, but others' perception of me was very, very different. I didn't know I was going up in flames. I didn't know that I was my worst enemy. So let's talk a little bit about what happens when we get stressed. What are those things that cause you stress? Those are your stressors, the things that cause you stress. What are the things that get under your skin? When you meet any of those stressors, it activates the stress response. The adrenal glands, and you'll see them in the graphic there, they secrete stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline among them. The stress response causes all of these things to happen automatically. This is the fight or flight response. And the fight or flight response is fine when doled out in little bursts, like when we're fighting or fleeing a threat, like our ancestors when they were roaming the plains. And if in the search of food, they met the dreaded saber-toothed cat that jumped out from behind a rock. In that instant, they needed to fight or flee the threat, lest they and the rest of the tribe perish. If they were successful and they returned to the relative safety of the cave, after about 3 hours outside of the realm of danger, the body's systems return to normal because the adrenal glands stop secreting stress hormones. But what do you think happens when we stress all day, every day about bills, childcare, pandemic, protests, mandatory overtime, my coworkers, the callers? When we stress all day, every day, this is always happening. The stress response is always on. And the human body is not geared, it has not evolved to take the stress and strain of the always on activation, which is why we cross over into burnout. And we start to see the third element of feeling stress. So the first element is stressors, those things that cause you stress. Second element is the stress response. And the third element is stress effects, which are specifically the chronic effects of the daily production of cortisol and adrenaline. And look at this graphic. From the top of your head to the tip of your toes, the body's systems, all of the body systems break down, specifically because adrenaline and cortisol are toxic when chronically running through the bloodstream. And some of these are really interesting. Like if you look at the cardiovascular system, increased blood pressure, increased heart rate. Think of that. The adrenaline dump causes the heart to beat more quickly. Cortisol causes blood vessels to constrict, so more blood is moved more quickly around the body. Also, cortisol causes the fat stores of the body to be converted into energy in the form of cholesterol and glucose. Fats and oils and sugars spill into the bloodstream because the body thinks you need to fight or flee a threat. But instead, we're just sitting at the console thinking about how one of our coworkers talked to us. So we have higher cholesterol as a result of the body's natural response to the perception, even the perception of a threat. Much of what we deal with now is psychological in nature. We're not fighting or fleeing threats in our environment. We're just dwelling on things. Same exact response. Immune system. Did you know that 70% of your immune system is contained in your digestive tract? What do you think happens to digestion when you get stressed? It gets suppressed. Cortisol causes blood to be moved away from digestion out to the limbs to fight or flee the threat. And so if your digestion is suppressed, so too is your immune system. Studies have found that those who are chronically stressed have lower white blood cell count. Maybe you have struggled and strived through a stressful time to get to vacation only to find that you're sick for the first 2 or 3 days. Because when we're no longer stressed, the body begins to feel what we're carrying around with us. And you might say, well, then that's cause to not take my foot off the gas. Wrong answer. Yes, it does look similar to trauma responses. Thanks, Jackie. The body does keep score. So I'd like you to consider which of the chronic stress effects you personally have or are currently experiencing. These are signposts. They're signposts pointing in the direction of much needed change. I did not know that my tension headaches, I didn't know that my anger and frustration, I didn't know that my road rage, my discipline record, I have 3 sustained citizen complaints from my time on the phones. I didn't know that all of these were telling me something about the way I was thinking about things in my environment. And you might be saying, oh my gosh, well, that's easier said than done. Changing the way I look at things and think about things. Yeah, it is. It's simple, but it isn't easy. But there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity because you might find that you are like the dreaded boiling frog. Did you know that a frog, when placed in a shallow pot of water atop a range, will sit in that room temperature water? Turn the range to low. As the water increases in temperature, the frog, being cold-blooded, will adjust its body temperature. Turn the range to medium. The water gradually increases in temperature, and the frog stays in the water and adjusts its body temperature. Turn the range to high. As the water gradually begins to boil, the frog, which can jump out at any time, adjusts its body temperature until it dies. And this is not unlike us. You are resilient by nature. That's why you can do this job. And we take on more and more and more, throw more and more things in our backpack, adjusting to the rising pressure, the rising temperature of our everyday life, not knowing that we can just set down that load. We can say no. We can reprioritize things. We can sift through the thoughts that are leading us to more or less stress. So here's a clue. For the most part, do you react or do you respond? Do you have the space to respond, or do you do the first thing that comes to mind? Do you react or do you respond? If you have ever said something that you later regretted, that is a sign that you reacted from an emotional, perhaps stressed state. That means there's an opportunity to take a breath. So many of us are so busy that we are locked in a highly anxious, reactive state. We're running from here and 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 there. There's an opportunity to slow your roll so you have more space to respond. Because I love what William James says. He said that the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. Oh, so I get to choose? Maybe. In order to have the space to choose the thoughts that will lead you to less stress, you have to take the time to create that space. And you say, oh my gosh, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Got to keep my nose to the grindstone. And in fact, we have a culture, we have a society that rewards busyness, rewards sacrificing ourselves for whatever is on our plate. Have you ever gotten in an argument with someone about how little sleep you've gotten? You come into work and you're like, oh my gosh, I slept 2 hours. And they're like, oh, you slept 2 hours? It must be nice. I've slept 2 hours the last 10 days. I don't know if that's something to be bragging about. My friend Sarah at the LAPD, one of my coworkers, she found out the hard way that she needed to create some space. And it wasn't until she was bedridden, her doctor put her on bed rest before she prioritized things differently. And when she was put on bed rest, she had to tell her family. She has 3 sons ranging in ages from 10 to 15, probably 4 sons if you include her husband in the mix. She had to tell her family, I need help. She had to ask for help. And she had a problem with that because she was a perfectionist. She found that the only way to get the job done right was to do it her way until she couldn't. And there was an opportunity there. And when she got well, she allowed her family to continue to take on those responsibilities. Now, if this sounds interesting to you, I'm curious. What might you be able to say no to? What might you be able to offload? What might you be able to renegotiate when it comes to your time? I want to give you 4 specific stress resilient strategies that you can bring into your daily life. And if you fashion a personal program or a block of time each day to use these strategies, it can change everything. In my experience, I did 2 things differently. At the 7-year mark, I did 2 things differently that took no more than 10 minutes each day. And I did have to practice them daily. But in 10 minutes, once a day for 6 weeks, ushered in the space that I needed to change everything. Now, the first stress resilient strategy is to move more often. And specifically, I'm talking about getting more exercise. And I'm not going to lecture you about whether or not you need to exercise more, but I will say this. Meet yourself where you are at. If you aren't getting much exercise right now, just commit to going on a walk. In fact, there was a study done that found that just 10 minutes of brisk walking twice a day after 21 days was enough to improve aerobic fitness level in the test subjects by 10 to 15 years. So it was a sedentary population that was doing no exercise, and they just began to do 10 minutes of brisk walking twice a day. After 21 days, they tested an aerobic fitness level 10 to 15 years younger than the group that did not do any exercise. And another thing, we as type A overachievers, we say, okay, I'm going to do it. I've been putting off my fitness goals, and I'm going to go get some new shoes. And you do that. You go to Foot Locker, you get some new shoes. They're the latest model of your favorite running shoes, and you lace up your shoes. And tomorrow you go push yourself really hard. How do you feel the next day after that? And the next day after that? Probably not so well. That's not meeting yourself where you are at. What's something that you can do today to incorporate more movement? This could be as simple as standing up at your console, taking a break, actually taking a break, especially if you're a union shop at your comm center and you have breaks. Get outside of the building. Get more exercise. I will say that the importance of exercise cannot be overstated for our profession. When we're in the chronically stressed state, we have adrenaline and cortisol always running through the bloodstream. The fight or flight response is designed to get us up and into action. Instead, we're just stewing in the stress hormones. Getting some movement helps your body process and filter out the stress hormones that are keeping you up at night, that are preventing you from sleeping, that are preventing you from actually being able to relax. Second stress resilience strategy is to nourish yourself. Prioritize eating more healthy meals. You know as well as I do, our propensity is to sit at the console and just self-medicate, often with food. I was visiting a comm center last year, and while I was there for like a couple of hours, someone at the console adjacent to me who had been eating this big bag of Ruffles, sour cream, and onion chips, finished the whole bag in like one sitting. Hey, and I am all for snack foods. I love chocolate. I love chips. Not every day, unless I want to feel it. So nourishing yourself and eating healthy meals is really about being more aware of how what you put in your body on a consistent basis, how it makes you feel. There's a correlation between how you show up each day and what you most frequently put in your body. We have to eat less of the stress promoting diet, the dispatcher diet, and eat more of the stress reducing diet. What's some specific thing that you can do today to decrease the consumption of the stress reducing diet? If you drink a lot of soda, just cutting back can help. If you smoke, cutting back can help. If you drink after every shift, cutting back can help. Notice how what you put in your body makes you feel. Third stress resilience strategy is to connect with others, engage in social support. It's a fact that after about 2 or 3 years in a public safety profession, we stop hanging out with people who don't work in public safety because of the shifts, because of the type of work, because we're tired of people saying, "Oh my gosh, you're a 911 dispatcher? Tell me about your craziest call." And we're like, "Oh, I don't want to talk about it." And so we begin to kind of avoid those people, isolate ourselves from things that will remind us of what we're carrying around with us. And I encourage you to have a support network that includes both coworkers, friends, work friends, BFFs, and people who don't work in the profession. Now, you might say, but we're working mandatory overtime. I don't have time to fraternize with other people. In fact, the reason why I hang out with work people is because it fits. It's convenient. Well, you may have to carve out some time to socialize in a more intentional way. And it can help by looking at your wheel of life. The wheel of life is the 8 dimensions of your life in a nifty wheel. I'd like you to consider your ranking in each one of these areas. 1 being near the center means very dissatisfied, to 10 near the outside means very satisfied. And just do a quick ranking of each one of these 8 dimensions of your life. How satisfied are you? How do you feel about each area depicted here? Physical environment means the house you live in, the town you live in, things that make up your physical environment. And if we were in person, you would have this on a handout, and you would be able to write it down there. And when we do this exercise live, you do the little rankings. I'm drawing on the slide here. Do the little rankings, and then connect your rankings by going around the wheel. And if your wheel looks something like this, the question is, if this were a wheel on your car, how bumpy would the ride be? So you get to kind of consider what that looks like for you personally. In order to improve your most dissatisfactory area, just by looking at your most dissatisfactory area and taking proactive steps towards improving satisfaction in that area, like a rising tide that lifts all boats, it will improve your overall level of life satisfaction. But in order to do that, you may have to take that time for yourself. You may have to say no more often. And for heroic caregivers, saying no can be an anxiety-producing thing. I'd like you to consider and write down who or what you need to say no to in the next 7 days. And don't write mandatory overtime, because it's mandatory. I have no control over that. Think of some area of opportunity. How often are you saying no when you mean to say, or how often are you saying yes when you mean to say no? Also, who is on your list of people that you can reach out to when you need help? Collectively, we have to be able to say and be willing to say that it's okay to not feel okay. Asking for help does not mean that I am weak. It means that I am human. And each time we do that, we are fighting the stigma associated with it. And especially in public safety, there's been a lot of press about officer suicides. The suicides are hitting our dispatch centers as well. And if you know that there's someone who is struggling at your center, just turning to them and saying, "Hey, I want to let you know, you can come to me with anything." You can literally be the lifeline to someone who's just about to drown. And that's really what social support is all about. And the 4th stress resilience strategy is to adopt more stress reduction techniques on a regular and daily basis, to simply be. So if you're taking notes, please write these down. Move, nourish, connect, be. What is something that you can do each day to incorporate each one of these strategies into your daily life? As I said, it only takes 10 to 15 minutes each day to begin to prioritize your resilience. For stress reduction, one of the best tools that we have at our disposal right now, and you can do this right now, you can connect with your breath. You can just notice where your breathing is coming and going. You can notice if you're holding tension in your shoulders. You can notice how relaxed or not relaxed you feel, and bring more awareness to this. One of the best breathing practices out there is this 4x4 breath, or boxed breathing. The Navy SEALs use this technique to steel their nerves before they do their work. And I have several friends in 911 who use it similarly while working a critical incident, to create a break between calls, if it's call after call after call at your center. And it's to simply breathe in to a count of 4, hold to a count of 4, breathe out to a count of 4, and hold to a count of 4. I like doing this whole cycle for four times, doing the whole cycle 4 times. Also, there's 2 powerful tools that you can use on a daily basis to go from react to respond. The first one has nothing to do with Brad Pitt at all. I just wanted to make sure you're paying attention. It's actually the Pitt maneuver. The Pitt maneuver is when you start to feel stress take over, hit the pause button, then take a breath. There's the breath again. And then think, consider, how would you rather have this turn out? If you have a lot of history reacting instead of responding, you have a lot of evidence that maybe your way isn't the best way. You get to think and then take action from there. The second powerful tool to go from react to respond is the power of gratitude. See if you can dwell in gratitude more often. So I'd like you to consider, what are some of the ways that you can bring these strategies into your daily life, both at work and at home. And the reality is that you have a choice. After today, you have a choice. You can continue down the same old path, which is fine. It's been working. Your way has been working. Now, if you find that there's even one sliver of opportunity, meaning there's some area where your way maybe used to work, but it's not working anymore, you can then go the other path, which is to blaze a new pathway into your old worn habits. And the challenge is that if you choose to begin to blaze a new pathway, at some point you will reach an impasse, or it will feel like an impasse. And the temptation will be to jump off the path that you're blazing and jump back onto your old worn pathway. But I would encourage you to continue to blaze that pathway. It gets easier with time because you know where your old worn pathway will take you. What questions do you have about anything that we talked about? That's a great question, Jackie. The first step is to acknowledge the stress and then to name it. Yes, call it out. What are the things that get under your skin? What are the things that cause you stress? So heighten your awareness about it. And I found that you can try to diagnose. I mean, that's kind of a traditional psychology method. Like, we try to diagnose what's wrong. That's what the traditional psychological therapeutic method is all about. It's like diagnosing what's wrong and then working with that. It's possible to become aware of what you're dealing with and then just say, all right, this way doesn't work anymore. Let me try this instead, and opt for more healthy choices that bring you a feeling of well-being. So replacing your old habits with habits that are more conducive to whatever your vision for success is, and you get to contextualize that. I can tell, Jackie. Other questions? Anyone else have any other questions?
Adam.
Yes.
We've been working, we all basically work in a world of things that we can't change. And
Yep.
Just in life in general, that's a stressor and hard to accept. So what would be your sort of answer to getting down that road to be able to accept those things that you truly can't change?
Great question, and thanks for asking that. That's one thing that I grapple with on the non-emergency lines. And if you've ever worked at a high volume center, the non-emergency lines are blowing up all day long. And every single call, just the beep in my ear would drive me up the wall. I'd be like, "Arr!" And then I would say, Los Angeles Police, what are you reporting? Is it any wonder that after 60 or 70 of those calls, I was not a very nice person? So I had to accept that there's nothing that I can do to change that. First of all, also that I need to I needed to get clear about what my job actually was, working the non-emergency line, which is to create calls for service. It's very, very simple. And by just showing up and taking one call at a time and letting all that other stuff go, it became this kind of practice of being present. And I would notice that some calls would take me there And I would take a moment before I went back on ready for another call. I would center myself, use the breath, and I began to work in the realm of the things that I could control, and just letting go of the things that I couldn't control. And that's the serenity prayer works really, really well. For type A perfectionists, we want to control things. We're all control freaks. In fact, we are judged on our ability to control calls and control our radio board every single day. There is so much outside of our control, and that makes us stressed, just that in itself. So if you can get better at just dwelling in the spaces, dwelling in the not knowing, it's tremendously powerful. Here's a great exercise. When you go home, if you can't sit still, set a timer and force yourself to sit still for 5 straight minutes, being mindful of your breath. Get a hobby, focus on a hobby, do something that brings you joy, that can help you interrupt that do mentality, but that we're always so stuck in. Great question, Scott. Last thing I want to point you in the direction of is a few different resources, because an hour conversation isn't going to change your life. And if you would like additional resources to help you move in that direction, these are 3 books that I highly recommend. On Combat talks about Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman's perspective on PTSD. It applies to our profession, emotional survival for law enforcement, written as a guide for officers and their families, but also holds true for us in our profession. May you be proud of the work that you do, the person you are, and the difference that you make. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for being here. And if you have any questions for me personally, send me an email. I am at your disposal. Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Tia. Yes, PIT stands for pause, inhale, think, take action. Duchess, thank you for being here. Timm, our illustrious MC.
Yeah, I was curious if you could expand on the course you did in LA. You went over it kind of quick, and I'd never heard that before. But what you did for your coworkers, because I really would like to apply something like that here.
Sure. So what I proposed was I don't know about your sender, Timm, but we had the first 30 minutes of every one of our shifts was roll call training, and they would give us our shift assignments. They would make announcements for the city. They would do a training topic, and then they would dismiss us to relieve the offgoing watch. They allowed me to take another group of people, or a volunteer group of people, to another room. And instead of going to roll call training, they could do a 15-minute guided relaxation session where I basically walked people through breathing practices, mindful awareness practices. And I did that on a weekly basis. And so if there's someone who, or yourself, who can champion something very, very simple like that, it goes a long ways. One of my first speeches was a 12-minute speech where I introduced this program to my coworkers. There was 40 or 50 dispatchers in the room. And I basically told my story. I said, you've seen me change, and here's how I did it. If you want these differences too, then join us next week for the stress reduction session.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I would love to get something like that going, because we certainly, the cumulative effects we've all seen and lived through. And it's interesting. We had a psychologist once come in and speak to all our trainers, and so we had a room 20, 30, 40, and about 2 of us broke down, not even realizing just where we were at mentally. And as she was, I have no idea what the technique was she was using, but basically just got a few of us to open up to realize that we were just in a bad place. And so I think some folks don't even realize how stressed or what a place they are in, and the effects that it has on them.
So true. Yeah, I think that many of us keep ourselves so busy so we don't have to think about what we're carrying around with us.
Yeah.
And it takes courage just to be still. It really does.
Yeah. And well, before we close this out, anyone else, any questions at all for Adam? I know he has his contact info up. Did you get everything out of the chat there?
I did indeed. Thank you all. And thank you, Lena. Thank you, Caesar. Thank you, Tia. I'm at your disposal. Don't be a stranger. Thanks again, Timm.
You got it. Thanks a lot, everyone. You have a great day, Adam.
Thank you. You too.